The transport ship dropped through the purple clouds of Vrexia Prime, and Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the window. Below, massive crystalline structures rose from the ground like claws reaching for the sky. This was the homeworld of the Vrex, one of the most powerful species in the Galactic Consortium. Sarah's hands trembled slightly. She was the first human to ever visit this planet. The Vrex were impressive creatures. They stood over 8 feet tall with sleek bodies covered in scales that shimmered between deep blue and black. Their faces reminded Sarah of Earth's big cats mixed with ancient raptors. Sharp teeth, intelligent golden eyes, and retractable claws that could cut through steel. They were apex predators who had conquered 12 star systems before humanity even invented the radio. When Sarah stepped off the ship, a wall of Vrex soldiers stood waiting. Their armor gleamed in the orange sunlight. At the front stood Commander Krell, the captain of the elite guard. His scales were darker than the others, marked with silver scars from countless battles. "Dr. Chen," Krell said, his voice a deep rumble, "I am assigned to protect you during your stay." Sarah knew what that really meant. She was being watched. The Vrex didn't trust humans yet. Humanity had only achieved faster than light travel 5 years ago. To the ancient species of the Consortium, humans were babies stumbling into a dangerous universe. "Thank you, Commander," Sarah replied, keeping her voice calm and friendly. "I'm honored to be here." Krell's golden eyes studied her for a long moment. Sarah knew what he saw. A small creature, barely 5.5 feet tall, with soft skin and no natural weapons. Humans looked weak compared to the Vrex, but Sarah had learned long ago that looking weak could be an advantage. The Vrex government building was enormous, with ceilings so high Sarah felt tiny. Diplomat Vexthor, an older Vrex with silver streaks in his scales, met them in a conference room. "Dr. Chen, you understand why you are here?" Vexthor asked, settling onto a raised platform designed for Vrex bodies. "Your cubs are sick," Sarah said simply. "The bonding failure syndrome. You've lost 200 cubs this year alone." Vexthor's tail lashed with agitation. "It is a crisis. Our cubs refuse to bond with their birth packs. They become aggressive, withdrawn. Then they simply stop eating, stop living. Our best doctors cannot explain it." Sarah had studied the reports during her journey. The Vrex raised their cubs in strict pack structures. Each cub was assigned to a pack at birth. They learned hierarchy, combat skills, and loyalty. It had worked for thousands of years. But now something was changing. "I'd like to see the cubs," Sarah said. The room went silent. Even Commander Krell shifted uncomfortably. "That is not possible," Vexthor said firmly. "Cubs are sacred. They are also dangerous, unpredictable. Even trained handlers have been killed." "I know," Sarah replied, "but I can't help if I can't observe them. I promise to follow all safety protocols." Vexthor and Krell exchanged glances. Finally, the diplomat sighed. "Very well. But Commander Krell's entire unit will be present. At the first sign of danger, you will be removed." The cub nursery was located underground, built like a fortress. Sarah could hear the sounds before she saw anything. Snarls, hisses, and strange whining noises that made her heart ache. The Vrex handlers looked exhausted, their scales dull with stress. Through a thick, transparent wall, Sarah saw them. Vrex cubs, each about the size of a large dog, paced in individual enclosures. Their scales hadn't fully developed yet, showing patches of soft skin. They looked miserable. "These are the rejected ones," a handler explained. "They refuse their pack assignments. We keep them isolated so they don't harm each other." Sarah watched one cub in particular. It sat in the corner of its enclosure, rocking slightly. One of its legs was bandaged. "What happened to that one?" she asked. "That is Crix," the handler said sadly. "He attacked his pack leader when he was only 3 months old. Unthinkable behavior. We had to separate him. He injured himself trying to break out of containment." "Let me in," Sarah said quietly. "Absolutely not," Commander Krell growled. "Dr. Chen, that cub is extremely dangerous." Sarah turned to face him. "Commander, I've worked with traumatized animals on Earth for 15 years. I understand the risks, but I need you to trust me." "Trust?" Krell's laugh was harsh. "Human, I have seen warriors torn apart by cubs half that size. You have no claws, no armor, no natural defenses. You would die in seconds." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "Or maybe I understand something about these cubs that you don't." She didn't wait for permission. Sarah walked to the enclosure door and pressed the release button. Alarms blared immediately. Vrex handlers shouted. Commander Krell moved to grab her, but Sarah was already inside. Crix's head snapped up. The cub's eyes locked onto Sarah, and his lips pulled back to show rows of needle-sharp teeth. A deep growl rumbled from his chest. Sarah sat down on the floor cross-legged. She didn't look directly at Crix. She didn't make any sudden movements. She simply sat there, breathing slowly. "What is she doing?" one of the handlers whispered. "She's going to die," another replied. Crix crept closer, his body low to the ground. Every muscle was tensed, ready to attack. Sarah could see him shaking. But she noticed something the Vrex had missed. Crix wasn't just aggressive. He was terrified. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The Vrex watched in silence, weapons ready. Crix circled Sarah, sniffing the air. He growled several times, testing her. Sarah remained still, breathing calmly. She let her mind drift to peaceful thoughts, remembering her old dog from childhood, the cat she'd rescued in college, the wildlife she'd rehabilitated. Slowly, Crix's growling stopped. His body relaxed slightly. He sat down a few feet away from Sarah, watching her with those intelligent golden eyes. 2 hours passed. Sarah's legs were cramping, but she didn't move. Finally, Crix stood up. He limped closer, his injured leg held carefully. He sniffed Sarah's hand. Then, with a small sound that was almost a whimper, Crix collapsed against her side. Within seconds, the cub was asleep, his breathing deep and steady. Commander Krell stared in disbelief. "That's impossible." Sarah carefully stroked Crix's scales, feeling his small body relax completely against her warmth. "No," she said softly. "It's trust. Something these cubs haven't been given." The handler who had spoken before approached the enclosure slowly. "In all my years, I have never seen a rejected cub bond with anyone. And certainly never with an alien species." Sarah looked up at the assembled Vrex. "Your cubs aren't sick. They're not broken. They're just different than what your society expects. And different isn't the same as wrong." Commander Krell's claws extended and retracted several times, a sign of deep confusion. "You are saying our entire understanding of cub development is incorrect?" "I'm saying maybe it's incomplete," Sarah replied. "These cubs are rejecting the rigid hierarchy you're trying to force them into. They want something else, something you've forgotten how to give." "And what is that?" Krell demanded. Sarah smiled down at the sleeping cub against her chest. "Choice, affection without conditions. The freedom to bond with who they choose, not who they're assigned to." She looked up at Commander Krell. "These cubs don't need to be fixed, Commander. They need to be understood, and I think I can help with that." Crix stirred in his sleep, making a small, contented sound. His small claws gripped Sarah's shirt gently, holding on like he was afraid she might disappear. For the first time in months, the cub called Crix was at peace. News of what happened in the nursery spread through the Vrex capital like fire. Within hours, every government official, military commander, and media outlet knew the same impossible story. A human, small and defenseless, had walked into a cub enclosure and survived. More than survived. The rejected cub had chosen to sleep beside her. Commander Krell found himself answering the same questions over and over. How did she do it? What technique did she use? What weapon or technology allowed her to control the cub? "She used nothing," Krell repeated for the 10th time that day. She simply sat down and waited. The cub chose to approach her. The officials didn't believe him. It went against everything the Vrex understood about cub behavior. But the security footage didn't lie. Krell had watched it himself 5 times, trying to understand what he had witnessed. Sarah was given quarters in the diplomatic section, close to the nursery. She had insisted on staying near the cubs. The Vrex had agreed, mostly because they wanted to study her further. Krell was assigned to guard her door personally, which he found both insulting and necessary. He was the captain of the elite guard, protector of the Vrex High Council. Now he was a babysitter for a human. On the 3rd night, Krell heard strange sounds from Sarah's quarters. He burst through the door, weapon raised, expecting an attack. He froze. Sarah sat on the floor of her room, surrounded by cubs. 5 of them, all rejects from the nursery. They were piled around her like she was the center of their universe. One cub, Crix, had his head on her lap. 2 others were pressed against her sides. The remaining 2 slept nearby, their small bodies completely relaxed. "Dr. Chen, what is this?" Krell demanded. Sarah looked up, her expression calm. "Good evening, Commander." The cubs were agitated in the nursery. I asked if I could bring them here for the night. The handlers agreed. This is highly irregular, Krell said, but he lowered his weapon. Cubs do not sleep in groups unless they are part of the same assigned pack. And they certainly do not sleep with alien species. I think that's the problem, Sarah said softly, stroking Crix's scales. Your cubs are social creatures. They need connection. But you've made connection conditional. They have to earn their place through strength and dominance. These cubs can't or won't do that. So they get rejected, cast out, left alone. Krell watched the sleeping cubs. Their breathing was synchronized with Sarah's, rising and falling in the same peaceful rhythm. On Vrexia, strength is everything. A weak cub becomes a weak warrior. Weak warriors get killed. We teach hierarchy and discipline because it keeps our people alive. I understand, Sarah replied, but these cubs aren't weak. They're just wired differently. Look at them, Commander. They're not fighting for dominance. They're not establishing a hierarchy. They're simply being together, sharing warmth and security. One of the cubs, a small female named Syrah, yawned and stretched. Her eyes opened and she saw Commander Krell standing in the doorway. Instead of cowering or attacking, she chirped softly and went back to sleep. Krell felt something strange in his chest. He had been raised in the traditional way. Fight for your position. Never show weakness. Trust only your assigned pack. It had made him strong, a leader of warriors. But watching these cubs sleep peacefully without fear or aggression, he wondered what had been lost in that training. I should report this, Krell said, but he didn't move. You should, Sarah agreed, but maybe stay a few minutes first. Just observe them. Against his better judgment, Krell sat down near the doorway. The cubs didn't react to his presence. They simply slept, trusting that they were safe. It was the most bizarre thing he had ever witnessed. By the end of the first week, 8 cubs were sleeping in Sarah's quarters every night. The nursery handlers didn't understand it, but they couldn't deny the results. The cubs were eating again. They were growing. They were happy. The elite guard noticed changes too. Krell's soldiers had to stand watch outside Sarah's quarters in rotating shifts. At first, they treated it like any guard duty. But something strange began to happen. Young warrior Dax found himself lingering near Sarah's door even when his shift ended. He told himself it was dedication to duty, but really he just wanted to be near the cubs, near the human who had somehow created peace in the middle of chaos. Veteran soldier Thorne started bringing extra food from the military commissary. For the cubs, she said. Growing cubs need proper nutrition. But Sarah always thanked her warmly, and Thorne found herself returning with food every day, staying to watch the cubs play. Commander Krell tried to maintain discipline. This is not appropriate behavior for elite guard members, he told his soldiers. You are warriors, not caretakers. But even as he said it, Krell found himself checking on Sarah's quarters 3, 4, 5 times per shift. Just to make sure she was safe, he told himself. Just to verify the cubs were secure. The truth was more complicated. Something about the human pulled at instincts Krell didn't know he had. When she smiled at him in thanks, when she asked about his day, when she treated him with genuine warmth instead of fearful respect, he felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. The political situation grew tense. Conservative members of the Vrex Council called for Sarah's removal. She is contaminating our cubs with alien weakness, they argued. These cubs will never become proper warriors. She is destroying our culture. But other council members disagreed. She is saving our cubs, they countered. 200 dead cubs this year. Now we have 8 thriving. Which outcome honors our culture more? Diplomat Vexthor visited Sarah's quarters to see for himself. He arrived expecting to find cubs made soft and weak by human influence. Instead, he found cubs who were alert, intelligent, and playful. When Crix demonstrated his hunting skills by pouncing on a training dummy, his technique was flawless. I don't understand, Vexthor admitted. He has all the skills of a proper cub. Better even. He is healthy and strong. But he follows no hierarchy. He shows no submission. That's because dominance and strength aren't the same thing, Sarah explained. Crix is strong. All these cubs are, but they don't need to prove it every second of every day. They know they're safe here. They know they're valued, so they can focus their energy on learning and growing instead of fighting for scraps of approval. Vexthor's tail swished thoughtfully. You're suggesting that our traditional methods waste the cubs' potential? I'm suggesting that your traditional methods work for some cubs, but not all. The ones who are different get crushed by a system that only values one type of strength. Sarah gestured to the cubs playing together. Imagine what your society could become if you made room for different types of strength. That night, Vexthor wrote a report that would shake the foundations of Rex society. On the 10th day, everything changed. Sarah was walking through the government district with Crix and 3 other cubs. Commander Krell and 4 elite guard members accompanied them. It was supposed to be a simple walk, a chance for the cubs to get exercise and sunshine. The assassin struck without warning. A Vrex warrior in civilian clothes lunged from the crowd, plasma blade extended. He moved with trained precision, aiming directly for Sarah's heart. Death to the human contamination, he screamed. Everything happened in seconds. Krell's weapon came up. The elite guard moved to intercept. But the cubs were faster. Crix hit the assassin low, his small body slamming into the warrior's legs. Sarah leaped for the blade arm, her teeth clamping down. The other cubs spread out in a defensive formation around Sarah, snarling with surprising ferocity. But it was what happened next that shocked every witness. The elite guard didn't wait for orders. They moved as one with the cubs, forming a seamless defensive wall. Young warriors and young cubs working together, protecting the same target. The assassin was subdued in moments. Sarah stood in the center of the protective circle, unharmed. Around her, cubs and elite guard members stood shoulder to shoulder, breathing hard, their bodies tense and ready for more threats. Commander Krell stared at his soldiers. "What did you just do?" Young warrior Dax looked confused. "We protected the pack, sir." "The pack?" Krell repeated. "She is not pack. She is an alien dignitary under our protection." But even as he said it, Krell knew he was lying. To himself, most of all. Because when that blade had appeared, when Sarah's life was in danger, he hadn't thought about duty or orders or diplomatic protocol. He had thought, protect the pack. Protect her. Sarah knelt down, checking each cub for injuries. They pressed against her, seeking comfort after the violence. She whispered softly to them in her human language, words the Vrex didn't understand but could somehow feel. Thorn approached Sarah slowly. The veteran warrior's scales were flushed dark with emotion. "Dr. Chen, I apologize. We should have prevented the attack. You saved my life," Sarah replied gently. "All of you. The cubs, too. You worked together perfectly." "Yes," Krell said slowly, understanding dawning in his mind. "We did, cubs and adults. Different generations. Different ranks. All moving as one. This is not supposed to be possible in Vrex culture." Sarah looked up at him, and Krell saw something in her eyes he had never expected to see from prey looking at predator. She wasn't afraid. She was proud. "Maybe," Sarah said softly. "Your culture is evolving, Commander, and maybe that's not a bad thing." That night, the entire elite guard unit refused to leave Sarah's quarters. They arranged themselves around her vessel, and the assassination attempt sent shockwaves through the Galactic Consortium. Within 48 hours, 3 investigator ships arrived at Vrexia Prime. They came from the Consortium Security Council, representing a dozen different species. Their mission was simple: determine if humanity posed a threat to galactic stability. Lead investigator Zixtal was a Korthan, a species that resembled Earth's insects more than anything mammalian. Her compound eyes missed nothing, and her analytical mind was famous throughout the consortium. She had investigated 17 potential threat species in her career. 14 of them had been quarantined or restricted from certain planets. Commander Krell met the investigators at the landing pad. He knew this was bad. If the consortium decided humans were dangerous, Sarah would be expelled. Humanity might be banned from certain sectors. All the progress with the cubs would be lost. "Commander Krell," Zixtal said, her voice clicking and precise. "We need to examine the human-designated Dr. Sarah Chen. We have received disturbing reports about her influence on your species." "What kind of reports?" Krell asked, his claws extending slightly. "That she is using some form of psychological manipulation. That she has compromised your elite guard unit. That she is creating unhealthy dependencies in Vrex cubs." Zixtal's antennae twitched. "Some species in the consortium believe humans are developing a weapon we have never encountered before. A weapon of emotion and attachment." Krell felt anger rise in his chest, but he forced it down. Getting defensive would only confirm their suspicions. "Dr. Chen has done nothing wrong. She has helped our cubs when our own people could not. That is precisely what concerns us, Commander." A alien species should not be able to influence your young so easily. It suggests a form of control that could be very dangerous. Sarah sat in an interrogation room, facing a panel of 6 investigators from different species. Zixtal sat in the center. To her left was a massive Thurian, built like a walking mountain of muscle and bone. To her right, a wispy energy being from the Lux Collective floated in a containment field. Dr. Chen, Zixtal began, please explain your methods for bonding with Rex cubs. Sarah took a deep breath. She had known this was coming. I don't use any special methods. I just spend time with them. I listen. I respond to their needs. I give them affection without demanding anything in return. Affection without conditions, the Thurian rumbled. This is not how predator species operate. There is always hierarchy, always dominance. Your behavior is abnormal. Maybe for some species, Sarah agreed. But humans are different. We're social omnivores with a unique evolutionary history. We didn't just hunt prey. We domesticated other species. We formed bonds with animals that should have been our competitors or our food. Wolves became dogs. Wildcats became house pets. We even keep prey animals as companions, the Lux being pulsed with light. You admit to converting other species to serve you. This confirms the threat assessment. No, Sarah said firmly. Domestication wasn't slavery. It was mutual benefit. Dogs got reliable food and shelter. Humans got help with hunting and protection. It was partnership, not control. Zixtal leaned forward. And now you are doing the same with the Vrex. You are converting their cubs to serve human interests. That's not what's happening, Sarah protested. I'm helping cubs who were rejected by their own society. Cubs who were dying because they didn't fit into rigid pack structures. All I did was offer them acceptance and safety. And in exchange, they bond to you completely, Zixtal said. They would die for you. We have seen the reports. The cubs defended you against an adult Vrex warrior. That level of loyalty is dangerous, Dr. Chen, especially when it is given to an alien species. Sarah felt frustration building. You're looking at this all wrong. The cubs didn't bond to me because I controlled them. They bonded because I gave them what they needed, what their own people couldn't give them anymore. And what is that? The Thurian demanded. A choice, Sarah said simply. The right to bond with who they want, not who they're assigned to. The freedom to be themselves without constant fear of rejection. The investigators exchanged glances. They spoke in a language Sarah's translator couldn't follow. Finally, Zixtal turned back to her. Dr. Chen, we need to conduct a practical test. We will expose you to other species young. If your influence is species-specific, you will have no effect. If you can bond with multiple species, it confirms you're using some form of universal manipulation technique. I'm not manipulating anyone, Sarah said tiredly. But fine. Run your tests. They brought in young members of 5 different species. A Thurian juvenile, aggressive and territorial. A Corthan larva, suspicious and isolated. A small Lux being, barely conscious of its own existence. A reptilian Scrix hatchling, programmed by instinct to fear everything. And a mammalian Drex child, already trained in combat hierarchies. The investigators watched through observation glass as Sarah entered the room. They had sensors monitoring her brain activity, her pheromones, her body temperature. They were looking for any sign of technological enhancement or biological manipulation. Sarah looked at the 5 young beings in front of her. They looked miserable, scared, confused about why they had been taken from their families and put in this sterile room with a strange alien. She sat down on the floor, just like she had with Crix. She didn't approach any of them. She just sat quietly, breathing calmly, and waited. What is she doing? The Thurian investigator asked. She is taking no action. Patience, Zixtal murmured. Let us observe. Minutes passed. The young beings stayed in their corners, watching Sarah warily. Then the Drex child, driven by curiosity, crept closer. Sarah didn't react. The child sniffed her, then backed away. 30 minutes later, the Corthan larva approached. It made clicking sounds. Sarah clicked back, not perfectly, but close enough. The larva seemed interested. An hour passed. The Lux being floated closer, drawn by something in Sarah's energy signature. She held out her hand and tiny sparks of light danced across her fingers. The Scrix hatchling was next, creeping on its belly. Sarah stayed still as stone, letting it explore her scent, her body temperature, her breathing pattern. Finally, 2 hours into the test, the Thurian juvenile approached. This was the most dangerous moment. Thurian young were aggressive, programmed to test boundaries through violence. The juvenile growled, showing impressive fangs. Sarah growled back. Not a challenge, but a response. She was acknowledging the juvenile's strength without submitting to it or trying to dominate it. The juvenile paused. This was new. Adults usually responded with greater aggression to establish dominance. But this small human just acknowledged, accepted. Slowly, carefully, the juvenile sat down near Sarah, not touching, but close. By the end of 3 hours, all 5 young beings were resting in proximity to Sarah. They weren't piled on her like the Vrex cubs, but they were comfortable, calm, safe. Behind the observation glass, the investigators were silent. This should not be possible, the Thurian said finally. Each of these species has completely different social structures, different bonding mechanisms, different communication methods, yet she connects with all of them. Zixtal's antennae were vibrating rapidly, a sign of deep confusion. I have never seen anything like this. She uses no technology, no chemicals, no psionic abilities. She simply exists in a way that makes young beings feel safe. It is a weapon, the Lux being insisted. Even if she does not realize it, her species has evolved something dangerous. Humans can infiltrate any social structure, corrupt any pack bond, create dependencies across species barriers. Or, Zixtal said slowly, they have evolved something we have never encountered before, a truly universal social compatibility. The final test came 3 days later. The investigators demanded a demonstration that Sarah's bonds were real, not manipulation. They insisted she undergo a traditional Vrex pack bonding ritual, one designed to break the will of captives and force submission. The ritual was ancient and brutal. The subject would be placed in a chamber with experienced warriors who would use psychological pressure, intimidation, and dominance displays to force submission. If the subject broke and submitted, they became the lowest member of the pack. If they fought back and won, they could join as equals. But fighting meant violence, potentially death. The ritual had never been performed on an alien species before. The consortium investigators wanted to see what would happen. Would Sarah's bonds with the Cubs and Elite Guard hold, or would they abandon her when she showed weakness? Commander Krell tried to stop it. This is madness. The ritual could kill her. She has no combat training. She will be forced to submit or die. If her bonds are real, your people will not let harm come to her, Zixtal replied. If her bonds are manipulation, they will break the moment she shows true vulnerability. This will prove the truth. Sarah stood in the ritual chamber, surrounded by 5 Rex warriors. They were not her friends. They were specialists in dominance combat. Their job was to break her. The ritual began. The warriors circled Sarah, snarling and snapping. They were testing her, looking for weakness. Sarah felt her heart pounding, but she didn't run. She didn't fight back. She simply stood there, breathing steadily. One warrior. The Vrex Grand Assembly Chamber held 3,000 representatives from across their empire. Today it was also filled with delegates from 18 consortium species. They had come to witness something unprecedented. A human would address the assembly, and the consortium would decide humanity's future among the stars. Sarah stood in the center of the chamber, feeling very small. Above her, tiers of seating rose like an amphitheater. Thousands of eyes watched her. Some curious, some hostile, some afraid. Commander Krell and his elite guard stood at the chamber entrance. They were not allowed closer. Protocol demanded that Sarah stand alone, but Krell had positioned his warriors where they could see her clearly. Where she could see them, the Cubs were in a special observation area kept under guard. Sarah could hear Crix's anxious whining even from a distance. It made her heart ache. Diplomat Vexthor opened the proceedings. We gathered today to address a crisis. Not just the Cub bonding failure that has plagued our species, but a larger question. Are humans a benefit to the consortium or a threat? Lead investigator Zixtal stepped forward. Her report would be crucial. I have spent 2 weeks studying Dr. Sarah Chen and her interactions with multiple species. My findings are complicated. Zixtal's image appeared on screens throughout the chamber. Humans possess an extraordinary ability to form cross-species emotional bonds. They do this through a combination of traits, advanced mirror neurons that allow them to read and reflect emotions across species barriers, body language that translates surprisingly well to different physiologies, Vocal patterns that hit frequencies associated with safety and comfort in multiple species, and most importantly, a genuine psychological drive to connect with and care for beings outside their own species. A Thurian delegate stood. You describe a perfect infiltration organism, a species that can slip past our defenses by triggering our own bonding mechanisms. This is extremely dangerous. I agree it could be dangerous, Zixtal replied. But intention matters. Humans did not evolve these traits to conquer others. They evolved them for survival. On Earth, humans were not the strongest predators. They survived by domesticating other species, by forming alliances, by expanding their definition of family beyond genetics. This is their evolutionary strategy. Connection, not domination. But the result is the same, a Lux delegate pulsed. They create dependencies. The Vrex cubs now need Dr. Chen. The elite guard is compromised. If humans spread throughout the consortium, they could destabilize every hierarchical society they encounter. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Sarah felt the mood shifting against her. Against humanity. Vexthor raised his hand for silence. Dr. Chen, you may address the assembly. Speak freely. Your words will determine not just your fate, but the fate of human consortium relations. Sarah stepped forward. Her legs trembled, but her voice was steady. Thank you, Diplomat Vexthor. And thank you to all the species represented here today. I know I'm asking you to trust something that seems dangerous. Something that challenges your understanding of social bonds and pack dynamics. She took a deep breath. I want to tell you a story. 20,000 years ago on Earth, humans were struggling to survive. We were decent hunters, but not the best. We were smart, but not strong. We should have died out, but we did something no other species had done. We looked at wolves, creatures who should have been our competitors, and we saw potential partners. Sarah's image appeared on the screens, showing ancient Earth. Those first humans didn't dominate the wolves. They didn't enslave them. They offered food, shelter, safety, and in return, wolves helped humans hunt. They guarded human camps. Slowly, over thousands of years, wolves became dogs. But humans changed too. We became more social, more empathetic. We learned to read emotions in faces that weren't human. She gestured around the chamber. That's what you're seeing now. Not manipulation, not control, but the result of 20,000 years of practicing partnership with other species. We're not trying to infiltrate your societies. We're doing what comes naturally to us. We're trying to build bridges. A conservative Vrex Council member stood. Beautiful words, Dr. Chen. But you avoid the central issue. You have created dependencies. The cubs sleep beside you. The elite guard protects you beyond duty. You have corrupted our people with alien weakness, have I? Sarah asked. Let me ask you something. Before I arrived, how many cubs were dying each month? 20, 30? What was your solution? You had none. Your traditional methods were failing. Your cubs were evolving beyond your rigid hierarchies, and you couldn't adapt fast enough. She pointed to the observation area where the cubs watched. Those 8 cubs would be dead right now without intervention. Yes, they bond with me, but they also eat, grow, learn, and develop combat skills. Griggs can take down training targets faster than cubs twice his age. Sierra has tactical awareness that surprises your trainers. These cubs aren't weak. They're different, and different isn't wrong. You speak of the cubs, another delegate said, but what of the elite guard? Commander Krell's unit has shown concerning behavior. They spend off-duty hours near your vessel. They bring you offerings. They defend you with intensity beyond normal protection protocols. Explain this. Sarah saw Commander Krell shift uncomfortably at the entrance. His scales darkened with shame. She felt her heart break for him. I didn't mean for that to happen, Sarah admitted. I think humans trigger something in social species, something you've suppressed for good reasons. Your societies are built on hierarchy and strength. Emotional bonds complicate that. Make it messy. So you've evolved to limit emotional connections to assigned pack members only. She looked directly at Krell. But those instincts don't disappear. They just get buried. When I showed up, being openly affectionate, offering connection without demanding dominance, I accidentally triggered instincts your people had locked away. It's not manipulation. It's just compatibility. Like finding a frequency you didn't know you could hear. Then you admit you are changing our people? Vexthor said quietly, making them into something they are not. No, Sarah replied firmly. I'm giving them permission to be something they already are but were afraid to show. Commander Krell isn't weak because he cares about the cubs. He's not compromised because he wants to ensure I'm safe. He's just being allowed to express instincts that your culture has labeled as weakness. She turned to address the entire assembly. Every species here has social instincts. The drive to connect, to care, to belong. You've channeled those instincts in different ways. Hierarchies, hive minds, energy collectives. But the core need is the same. Humans are just really, really good at meeting that need, for ourselves and for others. The Thurian delegate who had spoken before stood again. This is precisely why you are dangerous. You make us feel things that interfere with our survival strategies. Emotions that cloud judgment. Bonds that create weakness. Or, Sarah said softly, bonds that create strength, new kinds of strength you haven't considered. When the assassin attacked me, the Cubs and Elite Guard worked together perfectly. Different generations. Different ranks. All protecting the same target. Commander Krell told me that should be impossible in Vrex culture, but it happened. Because in that moment, they weren't following hierarchy. They were protecting pack. Sarah's voice grew stronger. Imagine what your societies could become if you allowed for different types of social bonds. Not replacing your traditions, but expanding them. Room for Cubs who don't fit standard pack structures. Warriors who can work across traditional boundaries. Leaders who can connect with people at all levels, not just their rank. You describe a fantasy, a Korthan delegate clicked. Social structures exist for reasons. Remove them and you have chaos. I'm not suggesting you remove them, Sarah countered. I'm suggesting you make them flexible, optional for those who need different paths. The Cubs who would have died can now thrive. The warriors who felt limited by rigid hierarchies can now find new ways to serve. Nobody has to change. But everyone gets choices. Zixtel stepped forward again. Dr. Chen, I have one final question. The consortium is concerned about humanity spreading this influence. If we allow humans to interact freely with other species, what will happen? Will humans bond with everyone? Create these dependencies across the entire consortium? Sarah thought about this carefully. Honestly, I don't know. Some species might be more compatible with humans than others. Some might have no response at all. Some might find human behavior annoying or confusing. We're not magical. We're just one species with a particular evolutionary history. She smiled. But I'll tell you what I hope happens. I hope humans become bridges. Translators between species that don't understand each other. Mediators for conflicts that arise from different social structures. Teachers who can help Cubs and young beings who don't fit their birth societies. We're not trying to replace your cultures. We're trying to add to them, to offer connections you might not have considered before. The assembly was silent. Sarah could feel the weight of their decision pressing down on her. The fate of humanity and the consortium hung in the balance. Finally, Vexthor spoke. This assembly must vote, not just on Dr. Chen's presence on Vrexia, but on humanity's role in the consortium. The options are as follows. First, immediate quarantine. Humans restricted to the 6 months passed since the vote. Vrexia Prime had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Sarah watched these changes from her quarters, which had grown from a simple diplomatic room to something more like a home. The Cubs who had once slept beside her were growing fast, their scales darkening and hardening into adult colors. But they still came to her quarters every night, piling around her like they had from the beginning. Crix was nearly full size now, as tall as Sarah when he stood on his hind legs. But he still rested his head on her lap when the day had been difficult. Sira had become the tactical leader of the group, coordinating the younger Cubs with impressive skill. The other 6 were thriving, each developing their own personalities and strengths. The Vrex government had officially established new protocols for Cub development. The traditional pack system remained for Cubs who thrived in it. But now there was an alternative path. Cubs who showed different social needs could enter flexible bonding programs, where they chose their own pack structures. It was revolutionary. It was controversial. But it was working. The Cub mortality rate had dropped by 70%. That single statistic had convinced more skeptics than any speech Sarah could have given. Commander Krell had been promoted to Diplomatic Security Commander, overseeing not just Sarah's protection but the safety of all human visitors to Vrex space. His elite guard unit had become the first officially recognized multi-generation pack in modern Vrex history. Warriors and Cubs training together, working together, bonding across traditional boundaries. Krell himself had changed. He still maintained his warrior discipline, but there was a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He smiled more. He played with the cubs during downtime. He had even started bringing Sarah gifts, small tokens from Vrex culture that he thought she might appreciate. Sarah knew what this meant. Krell's feelings for her had grown beyond duty or pack loyalty into something more complicated. She was careful with this knowledge. Humans and Vrex could be friends, family even. But romance between species was legally and biologically complex. Sarah cared about Krell deeply, but she was mindful of the boundaries. The request came from an unexpected source. The Thurian government, one of the most traditional and hierarchical species in the consortium, formally requested a human cultural ambassador. Their young were experiencing similar bonding failures as the Vrex cubs had. Could humanity help? Sarah sat in a planning meeting with diplomat Vexthor and Commander Krell. On the view screen, representatives from 6 other consortium species waited their turn to make similar requests. "This is happening faster than we anticipated," Vexthor said, his tail swishing with concern. "Every species that observed your work here wants human ambassadors now. But Earth has sent only 12 trained xenopsychologists. You cannot possibly meet the demand." Sarah rubbed her temples. She was tired. The past 6 months had been intense. Success was wonderful, but it came with pressure. Everyone expected her to solve their social problems, to fix their broken bonding systems. She was one person. She couldn't save everyone. "We need to train more humans," Sarah said. "And we need to train people from other species, too. The principles aren't complicated. Respect individual differences. Allow flexible social structures. Prioritize emotional authenticity over dominance games. Anyone can learn this, but they cannot bond like you do," Krell said quietly. "Humans have natural abilities that other species lack. Training can only go so far." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "But humans shouldn't be the only solution. Each species needs to adapt their own cultures from within. We can guide. We can teach. But the real work has to come from you." A message alert chimed. Sarah checked her datapad and felt her heart skip. It was from Earth, from the Human Diplomatic Corps. The message was brief. Transport vessel arriving in 3 days. 25 cultural ambassadors. 40 support staff. 600 Earth animals for cultural exchange programs. Sarah's eyes widened. 600 animals? Vexthor leaned over to read the message. "What kind of animals?" Sarah scrolled through the manifest. Dogs, cats, horses, rabbits, birds, even some goats and chickens. "They're sending a whole mobile petting zoo." Krell looked confused. "What is a petting zoo?" Sarah couldn't help but laugh. "It's a place where humans, especially human children, can interact with gentle animals, touch them, feed them, learn about them. It's for education and entertainment." "You are bringing prey animals to a planet of predators," Krell said slowly. "This seems unwise." "Or," Sarah replied, "it's the next step. You've seen how the cubs react to me, how they respond to affection and gentle touch. Now imagine they could interact with animals bred specifically to be friendly and calm. Animals that won't judge them or fight them or establish dominance. Just creatures that exist to be soft and peaceful." Vexthor's eyes widened with understanding. "You're going to teach predator species how to be gentle by showing them prey that is not afraid." "Exactly," Sarah said. "Humans learned empathy partly through our relationships with domesticated animals. We learned to read emotions in faces that weren't human, to care for creatures that were completely vulnerable to us, to find joy in their happiness. Maybe that's something other species can learn too." The transport ship arrived on schedule. Sarah stood at the landing pad with Krill, his elite guard, and all 8 cubs. The ship's bay doors opened and a wave of sound washed over them. Barking, meowing, whinnying. The sounds of Earth. 25 humans emerged first, looking nervous and excited. They were xenopsychologists, animal behavioral specialists, and diplomatic experts. Behind them came support staff carrying equipment and supplies. And then came the animals. A young man led out a golden retriever named Max. The dog's tail wagged enthusiastically as he surveyed the alien landscape. The Vrex cubs pressed against Sarah, suddenly uncertain. They had never seen anything like this creature. "It's okay," Sarah said gently. "Max is a friend. He won't hurt you." Max spotted the cubs and his whole body wiggled with excitement. He loved meeting new friends. He bounded forward, his tail wagging so hard his whole rear end moved. Crix growled a warning sound. Max stopped and sat down, his mouth open in a dog smile, tongue hanging out. He waited, patient and friendly. Slowly, Crix crept forward. He sniffed Max cautiously. The dog remained perfectly still, letting himself be examined. Then Max did something wonderful. He leaned forward and gently licked Crix's snout. Crix jumped back, startled. Then he made a sound Sarah had never heard from a Rex before, a laugh. A genuine, delighted laugh. Within minutes, all 8 cubs were playing with Max. The dog ran in circles, the cubs chased him, and everyone was having the time of their lives. Commander Krell watched with his mouth slightly open, unable to process what he was seeing. Apex predator cubs playing with a prey animal, gently, joyfully. "This is impossible," Krell murmured. "No," Sarah replied, watching Sarah carefully groom Max's ears while the dog's tail thumped happily. "This is what happens when you let go of rigid definitions, when you allow beings to just be together without hierarchy, without dominance games, just existing in the same space, enjoying each other's company." Over the following weeks, the animal integration program exceeded every expectation. Frex cubs learned to be gentle with rabbits. Warriors found peace in grooming horses. Government officials discovered that cats were excellent meditation companions because cats absolutely refused to respect hierarchy or protocol. The most surprising success was the chickens. A group of conservative Rex Council members, skeptical of the whole program, agreed to observe a chicken coop. They watched hens scratch in the dirt, peck at food, and fuss over their chicks with fierce maternal devotion. One elder council member, a female named Kreshta, stood mesmerized as a mother hen protected her babies from a perceived threat, fluffing her feathers and making aggressive clucking sounds. "She is so small," Kreshta whispered. "But her courage is absolute. She would die for her young without hesitation." Sarah stood beside the elder. "Strength comes in many forms. That hen weighs maybe 5 pounds. She couldn't hurt you in a real fight. But her determination, her love for her babies, that's stronger than any weapon." Kreshta looked at Sarah with new understanding. "This is what you have been trying to teach us, that there is honor in tenderness, power in protection, strength in choosing to be gentle when you could be violent." "Yes," Sarah said simply. "You Rex are magnificent warriors. Nobody doubts your strength in battle. But you're also capable of such tenderness, such deep emotional bonds. You don't have to choose between the two. You can be both." A year after Sarah first arrived on Vrexia Prime, the planet hosted its first interspecies cultural festival. Representatives from 30 consortium species attended. There were demonstrations of traditional combat, diplomatic negotiations, and technological showcases. But the most popular event was the human-animal bonding experience. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy lined up to pet a dog, hold a rabbit, or simply sit in a quiet room with a purring cat. Warriors wept openly as puppies licked their faces. Politicians found themselves laughing like Q.